Good morning, everyone. For those who have been messaging me, we know we have Judgement with an extra E in there. I know it is superfluous. However, we wanted to go with the British spelling. This was intentional. Okay, I did ask Jessar, how do you want to do this? And she said, just, make it sound fancy. So that's why we went with the extra E.
We're fancy and spicy looking today. I like it.
You look amazing, actually. Yeah.
I got my Targaryen shirt on.
Can you read that to me? I'm looking at her. I'm trying to look at three things, and then what does it say?
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Oh yeah, that basically is your motto, isn't it?
Yeah, Targaryen's up in the shit.
All right, so make sure everybody can hear us properly. Hopefully
Lannister.
We started
Tyrion Lannister is what it was. I said Targaryen. Lannister.
Is that a Game of Thrones reference?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
this is how well spelled it in vanilla. This is the correct spelling.
Is this okay? Well, hey, like I said, this is something we decided. It was a mutual decision, even though she owns 95% of my channel. But yeah, so everybody's in messaging me like, why do you spell it that way? Because we wanted to. It just sounds better. I like the fact it has a judge in there. But
it sounds better. I'm pretty sure it sounds the same.
Well, okay, it looks better. Yeah, you're right. I guess it sounds the same either way. Judgment. Okay, sorry, it looks better. Okay. Well, I mean, you could throw in like a British accent to it, right? I mean, most British words do sound different, like color and color. I mean, even though they call it color, but to me, it's color with a U. In fact, I read somewhere if you actually use Judgment with the two E's instead of the one, you're supposed to use the British spellings for the rest of the whatever you're writing, right? So you want to keep it in the same domain, right? So if all British or all Americanized. But yeah, see, the E there is the second E is, or the first E in the two is superfluous.
Americans just don't like the British, so they started getting rid of all the U's.
Well, yeah, I mean they talk funny.
Oh yeah.
But they sound intelligent, right? Whenever British people say, it doesn't matter what they're talking about, they always sound like they know what they're talking about. So
I remember a post I read somewhere. God, it was years ago. I can't even remember where it was. And it had something to do with that Americans like being told things by posh British people. So like they listen more and they feel like they're being like spoken to by somebody with authority if the person has a posh British accent. I don't know. I cannot remember where I heard that. I don't think it's necessary. I don't know if it's true. I just remember reading about that and being like,
I'm sure that it is actually.
It sounds about right.
Yeah, I can't do accents. I can barely even do a Californian accent.
I demand that America stop spelling about with a U.
A boot.
No, a boot would be two O's.
Well, but I mean, how did you Canadians say garage?
Garage?
Yeah, so you say normal.
Garage? Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, garage.
Garage? I demand that America stop spelling about with a U because they don't pronounce it with a U. They do the same thing with color. I make these demands on behalf of nothing. I'm just saying you should.
Yeah.
For consistency.
Well, we have a lot of British audience because of the time thing. It's 8 hours ahead, so it's like 7 o'clock their time right now, so that they can chill with us.
Oh, nice.
A lot easier than some of the people like Pacific time. So
After
yes, we are catering
tea.
to the British people.
After dinner tea time.
Anyways, let's kind of dive into this because this is going to be an interesting
Speaking
topic.
Of posh British people who are educated.
Perfect segue, right? Because a lot of this is going to be dealing with Richard Dawkins, who is a posh British educated person, happens to be an evolutionary biologist. But before we even go into that segment with the whole thing going on with Richard Dawkins and the cancellation and the removal and strippage of his award that was supposed to be a humanism award for the year.
He must be drug out into the Twitter street and flogged.
Yeah. So this is not even something that just has to do with him. This is something that actually in America we're finding in state by state. Matter of fact, I was reading something the other day, and I kid you not. There's in New York City, they were actually having this course. It's based on critical race theory, that they're kind of indoctrinating kids to think that it's bad to be a certain color, meaning white privilege, right? And so
I mean, that's been kind of going on for a really, really long time, particularly with like colonialization and stuff. So people and just the study of American history kind of does do a lot of it's bad to be this race. Let us re-educate you because your culture is gross or wrong or whatever.
well, yeah,
America spent a lot of
sure.
time. Yeah, America spent a lot of time, not just America, lots of places did this back in the day, but you don't really do that anymore. Why? Because it wasn't a good thing to do. It was a wrong thing to do.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself as a child, having to listen to some of this stuff, being told that, hey, look, I'm wrong for the way I was born. Now, it doesn't matter what that wrongness is. It doesn't matter what his color, doesn't matter his height, doesn't matter his gender, doesn't matter his sexuality. Nothing of that matters. These are all intrinsic properties to oneself. And so it was not just New York City that they were having these problems. There was one in Michigan, and they had a little study thing, and they gave them homework on this particular group of kids. And do you want me to tell you what they consider to be white privilege? You want to know? I'll give you an example.
I'm scared.
I'm not even fronting. This is an example they had of white privilege. And sure, if you really want to, get technical, okay, great. It's an example of white privilege. But I got to tell you, to me, white privilege is more, look, you got a black person, a white person walking down the street in Beverly Hills. Who do you think the cops are going to follow if they split off and go different directions? I mean, that to me is white privilege, and it does exist. It absolutely does exist.
That's mostly because of the racist. That's because of the racism of the police, though, not because of anything the individuals are doing necessarily.
Oh, sure, yeah, well, of course, but that's the systemic problem in the police force, clearly.
Right.
But that does exist, and so this is and maybe I'm wrong on this. I will be happy if you guys tell me that this is typical of white privilege and that maybe I'm looking at this incorrectly or I'm looking at it wrong. You tell me, call in and let me know. I'll be happy to have this discussion with you. But here's an example that they gave, and you tell me what you think, Jess. Ready? Examples of white privilege. Shopping. Imagine that you, if you're white, are going shopping and looking in the cosmetic section for a brand of foundation that matches your skin tone. Are you fearful that your shade doesn't exist? Most likely not. This is white privilege.
Oh, okay. So
as a woman, you've gone through this before. So you tell me, are you fearful that they don't have your shade, and do you consider yourself have white privilege because of this?
I think fearful is a little bit much. I don't think that's a word
oddly placed to me.
Be like fearful as in like, oh, I'm afraid they're not going to have it. Like, I don't really want to go on it. I don't think they're going to have it. I'm afraid. But it's not like I'm afraid as in I'm scared. This is something I'm going to equate this to something I'm a little bit more familiar with. Pants in my size. I have a hard time finding pants in my size. So if I go to the store, I'm afraid they're not going to have it. So I tend not to go to the store, and I don't like clothes shopping. But I'm not fearful. I'm not scared as like I'm gonna get attacked kind of fearful. I'm just like I don't think they're gonna have it.
No, I totally get the sense of the word.
Bra sizes. People who have larger or smaller breasts or different breast sizes may be afraid that the store a particular store isn't going to have. So if you take like the general store, like say you take your Victoria's Secrets, they have standard sizes. They don't necessarily if you're a unique size, either like or a unique combo of size, then there's a decent chance they're not going to have something that's going to fit you properly. And you might be like afraid they're not going to have it. There's been a huge push in the cosmetics industry to bring a wider selection of skin tones. Like they've gone way out of their way. It's in their marketing. It's in everything to try and bring more to people's more palettes to people to provide them like how difficult it might be for contouring if you've got a different skin color, and to be able to use the right colors and so that the way those colors actually exist for you. But this is something that is improving. This is something that is getting better. That this has to do with this isn't I don't know if this is like, how old are the people that are going to this thing?
Well, I think this was grade school, if I'm not mistaken. But okay, so but I understand.
What
the
an
sense of the
odd
word.
example to use for
I
children.
think the word there is, especially when you're dealing with races.
It almost seems like they're setting an expectation in that
Well,
case.
but
I don't know
to
if
me,
I
it's
would
like a
call that.
subliminal thing. Why would you use the word fear? Again, I understand it means in this particular case, an anxiety, right? It has a trepidation that when you go there, you're not going to find what you're looking for. So it has some kind of angst or anxiety. I get that, but I think it's.
We
I think
use,
and why? How is it white? But
yeah.
how is it white privilege that you're thinking is? Oh, I'm going to the cosmetics section. Oh my God! If they don't have my foundation for my particular skin tone, some
I,
things are going to like happen that to kind
I,
of psychologically damage me.
I would probably say that it's the privilege of being white. You don't have to be worried that they're not going to have it.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? If you're
I get
white,
it,
you're not having that. You don't even have to have that thought. So that would be considered a privilege because you don't have to even consider that. You can just go and you don't. It's not even something you have to concern yourself with. But if you're not white, then so in that case, yeah, you could. I don't think it's a very good example. Like, I think that's a very, like, not convincing, not very helpful direction,
well,
but or technically the truth, I guess.
let's try this one. What if you're looking for a pair of shoes or lingerie and you find an item in the color, quote, nude? Are you forced to wonder why a brand's version of, quote, nude doesn't apply to you? Probably not. These are so bizarre to me. As somebody who worked in fashion, these never came up. I never had somebody go into the store.
Yeah, but what year was that, Steve?
Well, I quit in 2014 and I started working in 2007. So do the math. But yeah, but I mean, I never had somebody going, do you have this in nude? And if not, I'm going to have some kind of trepidation or fear.
Well, I imagine if somebody with a different skin tone asked you for a color in nude, you would look for their skin tone color. You wouldn't. I mean, it could go the other way, right? You could have it where like, no, I was looking for like white people nude.
Never had it happen. I sold a lot of bras. That never came up, not once. But of course, we had multiple different brands, right? I mean, we had in different sizes. I got to tell you, the bra section at Kohl's is probably one of the largest sections next to the shoe size. That is a huge market.
I don't know. Maybe it's just not as much of a thing in Canada. But very rarely do you hear a skin like a color of a shoe or a color of a bra called nude. They usually just call them light beige.
Yeah.
Instead of nudes.
Yeah.
At least for me, it would be that. And so if I wanted a dark brown, it would just be a dark brown, or it would be like, hey, I'm looking for a skin colored one. And so skin color would be whatever skin you happen to have. It's just not a term that I commonly hear. So I mean, maybe that's more of an American thing that is more problematic or less problematic. Yeah, but again, I can understand wanting something like that to change, but it's such like there are bigger problems that might need a little bit more. Like what if you're albino?
I mean, there's really no set color. It's usually like a really kind of a light beige kind of thing, but there's a lot of degree there. So they try to make things generally applicable to the most amount of women, obviously, right? I mean, this is why they have even unisex things or one size fits all kind of thing. But yeah, nude is kind of more of like a beige color, but it could be for any kind of skin tone. But yeah, I don't know. I've never had anybody consider this that to be white privilege. This seems like
it just seems like an undermine of it sounds to me like we're not going to talk about the police. We're not going to talk about privilege that is
real world issues that really going to
that we need help with and we need help fixing. We're going to talk about something that is like the most mundane. Your feelings should be hurt by everything.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what critical race theory actually
mostly because the reason it's making me think that a little bit is because if this is being taught to grade school children, you're basically setting this expectation of these kids that they should be offended if this is the case, or they should be this if this is the case. And like, you shouldn't try to train offense into people. Let them figure that out as they get older about what they do and do not find acceptable. Don't teach people what they should or should not find acceptable in this kind of a way. Like, it's one thing to have societal norms like it's wrong to hurt other people, not you should feel offended because, right?
Yeah, a lot of this,
That
like
makes
in the UK, it started in nursery teachers. So I guess that would be for the equivalent of grade school, right?
Kindergarten, maybe?
Kindergarten, yeah. Nursery teachers told to take white privilege lessons. So, but yeah, I think this was again in Michigan, and I think it was grade school, but I'm not positive of that, so don't quote me on that. But
I think it's understandable to like want teachers to maybe be more cognizant of social issues, because that will help them deal with children that have to live in these social conditions. That makes sense to me, but that's not what this is.
Yeah.
So if it was like, in the, let's say the, I don't know, 80s, I'm going to pull the 80s because that's what I'm grabbing. In the 80s, there were movies that were coming out about like Sister Act, where it's a church in like the hood, essentially.
Whoopi
And so they're
Goldberg.
trying to, yeah, Whoopi Goldberg movie. And there were ones about teachers going to underprivileged schools and like underdog stories for sports teams and what's the one with John Candy? Cool Runnings. Right? Like, you've got people who otherwise are maybe in a more privileged position being put in a position where they have to deal with people who are not privileged, and they learn a life lesson, and they learn to be better people, and that people should look out for each other, and the team gets good because they learn to trust and accept each other. And it's like, would you be opposed to teachers who are of the highest caliber going to underprivileged schools and maybe swapping places once every couple of months just to educate each other on where some children are coming from? Right? I think that's I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. I wouldn't be opposed to educating teachers on, hey, not every kid that it comes across your classroom comes from the same place. And it's important to have an understanding that not every kid has that, and not every kid is in the same position. And some kids have this and some kids don't have this, which makes it easier to recognize things like bullying between other kids. It makes it easier to be able to cater to which kids. But that, again, I wouldn't be opposed to any of these things, but that doesn't seem to be what this is.
yeah, I don't like the approach at all. I mean, I completely understand them talking about the history of racism, especially
I think having the discussion about it is fine. It's just this is not an age to be. They're not old enough to understand.
Well, I'm not quite sure of the age.
If it's grade school,
but even doesn't matter. Let's say it is high school. It makes no difference, because one of the questions here probably more for more of a high school age question. But I don't think it really makes much of a difference, because they're not talking about real world situations where it's, again, I think the biggest problem when it comes to a lot of stuff is dealing with police. I mean, I think that's a huge issue, because we're seeing it more and more. And I don't think it happens any more than it did any time before. I just think that it's being recorded more. I think that more people are documenting these things, so we're seeing more of these things. I think a lot of this stuff's been going on for since time began, kind of thing. But one of these here, this one says hairstyle, and I particularly have an issue with this one is because my rule of thumb is this: if you change the word white to black or black to white or anything like that, and it sounds racist, it probably is. Okay, that's my kind of my rule of thumb. And
yeah.
I don't think that making a child feel bad helps anybody. I don't think it raises anybody up. I don't think I think it should lift people up, not lower other people to make them feel as bad as other people that have been persecuted, right? So in this particular way it's stated, it starts off, if you're white, take a moment to imagine that you're going for a job interview, and it's specifically stated that certain hairstyles are unacceptable in the workplace, such as braids or dreadlock styles that are traditionally worn by black people. They've already set it up to have a distinction, a major distinction, that, look, if you're white, this, think about this. The other people don't think about this. You should just think about this. Education is supposed to be for everybody. I don't like the fact that they're singling anybody, because if this said, if you're black, take a moment to do this, right? And the white people don't have to do that. To me, it just comes across.
Well, could you imagine that if you were to flip that? If you're black and you're going to a job interview and they say that certain hairstyles are not acceptable where it is, and you should accept that, or you should say that no, that's not okay. I should be able to wear whatever hairstyle I want. In some ways, that's like a good thing. In other ways, it's a bad thing. I don't imagine. Like the thing is I imagine that a lot of the time, that's the conversation isn't happening in an interview with a white person.
Yeah.
And so you're telling white people to look out for this conversation that doesn't happen to them. Right. And that like this now it is privilege that conversation doesn't happen to them because the boss in this situation is a racist asshole. Right. So it's privilege that these white people aren't running into these conversations because that person's racist. What you ought to look out for is something more along the lines of, if you have a black employee, then maybe you shouldn't be putting arbitrary restrictions on them because that's kind of racist because you're only putting it on them because you don't like whatever it has to do with their culture or their race. So, or on the other hand, if you have a black coworker who seems to be struggling with a racist boss, report that boss to the next level up. We don't live in a world of segregation the same way anymore. You can't approach these problems as if you can't report the person, as if it's just okay for that boss to behave that way. The thing that would do better, in my opinion, would be to educate people on recognizing something that is or is not racist towards another group of people, rather than talking about the privilege of that. You don't have to worry about it. You can talk about privilege without making like a big honking mountain out of nothing, because a lot of the times, like, oh, hey, if you don't get told this, maybe your boss is racist and you should have a conversation with them.
Yeah, well,
why? Because they didn't tell me that because I'm white? Yeah. Well, I don't understand.
Because that's how I think they should approach it. You know, they should say, look, these are the type of discriminatory things we would see in the workplace. These are the things that we would find to be racist, right? They don't need to say, look, if you're white, you need to do this and nobody else does, right? To me, that is a form of racism.
It would be far better to be like, hey, listen, these are racist things that can happen. Here's what's racist. Here's why it's racist. If you see this happening in your workplace, here are the resources you need to report the person. Because a lot of times people don't know who to report. Who's the next person up? Where do I go? I don't want to lose my job. How do I report this? And so, like, if you provide people with the knowledge and those resources, that's going to help. And so you can talk about privilege in this situation without being like white people bad. You simply just have to have the conversation like, hey, listen, you guys probably don't run into this because it's not racist towards you. It is racist towards these other people. Let me explain to you why. And now here's how you can do something and help. Here's how you can help your coworkers who are of different skin tones than you.
Yeah,
and then provide them with resources.
Yeah, and they go on to say, does the mention of this restriction on hairstyles make you feel like you're being discriminated against because of your race? If not, that is an example of white privilege. It's like, wait a minute, white people can't have dreadlocks? Of course they can. You're automatically setting people up for this idea that there's a huge difference between white people and black people, when the whole intent is to tell people there is no difference. You know,
I think braids are a really bad example. White people have worn braids for a very, very long time. Like, braids have been around for ages.
And by the way, I want to make sure people.
I know what they mean. I just think it's a bad example.
But I want to make sure when I say there's no difference, as far as going for a job interview, your skin color should be absolutely irrelevant, right? We should acknowledge the differences that do exist on people. People have differences, and they should be celebrated. You know, what makes this world great is we have differences. But when you're going for a job interview, it should be based upon your qualifications, nothing more. And I don't think they even get that across in some of the stuff. But anyways, yes, I do know we're out of sync. We're running through Skype, but we're also having calls. So we're going through Google Meets as well. It doesn't meet up or sync up very well. I don't know why. Not much I can do about it. So anyways, we do have a caller. Who do we have on the line?
Hello.
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 Hey.
This sounds like a wild Mr. Serious.
Oh my gosh, I'm so recognizable anymore. Hello, how are you guys doing?
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm hoping I'm on the back end of a flare up. So I'm in
Ooh.
quite a bit of pain, but I'm making it. Um
That's no
but
bueno.
nobody else was calling, so I thought I'd just, break the barrier here and hopefully maybe cause a stream of other people to call after me.
Yeah, they usually start calling after like kind of get going kind of stuff. We haven't gotten into the Richard Dawkins stuff yet. Maybe there might be a lot to say on that because it's been all over Twitter and it's been all over
The stuff
Facebook.
we're talking about with like white privilege seems, I think, is touchy for a lot of people. So I don't think people sort of want to have the conversation. And the reason people don't want to have the conversation is because people are assholes and will call you a bigot because you're like, but I'm not a bad person.
Well, and you get
But
canceled,
also,
right? I mean,
well, if you
this is the
say
whole
I'm not
thing.
a bad person, it's like, yeah, no shit, we weren't talking about you, because that's another thing that happens. People are talking about this in general versus this specific. Like, we're talking about these people, the general, not these people, the individual, which people get confused all of the time.
Yeah, I get scatterbrained because I get like I think about stuff like this all the time. Like I this is okay. I used to live in a household that was like black mother, white father. They had they had two mixed race children. Um and they're like I was like the uncle, like
Aw,
they called me uncle. I was and I loved them dearly. They were
Uncle
so
Serious.
awesome. Yeah. um but the daughter, she comes home one day and she's talking to her mother, and I was in the room and I was listening to this, and it was, I found this so troubling. She was talking to her mother about how she was so upset that her mother and her were black. She's like, we're black. Like daddy is white, grandma is white, but we're black. Like that's bad. It's like, why? Why is that bad? Like, where are you getting this from? It's like she's at, like that was like that's what came after that. Like, why do you think this? Like, where did you get this from? Like, she is not in school. She is like 3. Like, where is this coming from? Where is this negativity coming from? She only watches like stupid crap on YouTube. I don't know. I don't know why. Like, oh my god, YouTube. And some kind of weird show on TV involving dogs. I can't
Paw
remember what it was about.
Patrol? How
Yeah,
dare
that
you? Paw Patrol.
that. And I'm like, what is happening? Why is there such a negativity about just this color of your skin? Like I mean, she got nothing but love in the house, so it's like I don't understand where this kind of comes from out of nowhere. It seems like out of nowhere to me. So, but we really couldn't narrow down where she was getting it from. We kind of thought maybe she was getting it from something at her grandmother's house because she spent a lot of time there too. So that's the only time that she was not in any supervision within anybody at the where we lived. So we had no idea. But at 3 years old, she's like bummed because she was mixed, but her mother was black. She was bummed about that. I'm like, why? What? That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, so
Yeah, children are sensitive to things like that, and children also pick up more than adults give them credit for a lot of the time. So you can make a passing remark or 2 or 3 remarks that would seem like nothing to you, or would seem like nothing to, you would think would seem like nothing to a child, but they hear that and they notice that, and it's like, oh, we're being treated like we're different. Oh, we're being treated poorly. One of the best stories I ever read was talking about how it was a story about how a little black boy came into a comic book shop and was talking to a girl who was working there. He's talking about how much he really liked Spider-Man, and they asked the kid if he liked Miles. Like asked who his favorite Spider-Man was, and they said, "Oh, Peter Parker." And so they had responded with, "Well, you know about Miles? He's my favorite." And he's like, "Who's that?" And he shows him Miles, and Miles is black. And the kid flipped out and was like just super duper happy to be like, "Look, Spider-Man looks the same as me." And it's important for kids kids, and I think we forget that as adults. Because once we're adults, we're already jaded. We're already like, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Whatever, it's not really that important. But for a kid, it can be a lot more. It can matter a lot more. So that's sort of one of the reasons why it's important to have diverse representation when it comes to media and when it comes to stuff for kids, right?
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with giving having more diverse characters for kids. My only caveat is I kind of wish they would just make more characters instead of trying to just love
try and shoehorn. Yeah, shoehorning is annoying.
When they force things, there's a lot more in your face, right? And I love the series back in the day that were very subtle in how they approached these issues. They were the most effective. I mean, like perfect examples is like look how the original Star Trek series dealt with a lot of these issues, right? When it comes to racial stuff, they did it amazingly good job at it. And then you have like the newer version of Star Trek Discovery, which is just blatant in your face.
If you have a character whose sole goal is to be a race and to recognize that's their character, you've fucked up. It's the same with women. It's the same thing. Oh, this character is a girl, so that way we can have a girl.
Yeah.
Or this character is a woman because women. Yay! It's no.
It's just like having a token thing, and again they do it so over the top, and it doesn't really give the message it's supposed to give.
Unless it's part of the character's arc or the character's development, the character's gender or race really shouldn't matter. Race right now is a little bit more of a big deal than gender is, I would say, because it matters in visuals differently. With Batman, you could make Batman a woman and it would change nothing about Batman. It would be meaningless. You could change Batman's race and people may or may not think it's more or less believable because he's like a rich white guy. So if you were to change him to a rich black guy, I don't think it would really change anything anymore. It wouldn't matter. Batman could be any race, he could be anybody, and it wouldn't matter. Of course, you would still get a bunch of people who are super duper mad that how dare you change a core thing about Batman. It's like, it's not a core thing. It doesn't matter.
The core thing would be black.
It changes nothing.
The core thing would be Black Panther or Black Lightning. Those are much more core things.
Well, Static Shock. Static Shock's part of his story has to do with him growing up as a black kid in this town. So that's part of his character. That's part of his arc. It matters. Yeah. But with Batman, he's already an adult. His upbringing is he was a rich kid with no parents.
Yeah, it had to do with affluence. It didn't have to do with race.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Question on the table real quick. Tree Feline asked a really good question because it has to do with Americans with Disabilities Act. She said, what if I'm discriminated against for a disability when it concerns a task where the disability is a real detriment to the execution of the job? The way the Disability Act is written is that a company has to make reasonable accommodations. That's the terminology they use. Reasonable accommodations. Let's say you're going for a secretarial job, and one of the key things they need to do is type 60 words a minute, and you have crippling arthritis, and there's no way you can possibly type. Unfortunately, there's not much that can be done, right? Because I don't know what a reasonable accommodation would be in that case when you have to type or,
drugs.
Yeah. But I mean, again, so just because you're unable to do that specific job function, there's only a certain amount of accommodation that needs to be done for you. For example, a long time ago, there was a lawsuit that was raised with Hooters because the Hooters business model was obviously having pretty buxom women serve food. That was their business model. And so some other people felt that was discriminatory. The courts sided against them. They sided for Hooters, saying that this was strictly fine because in this particular case, it was an integral part of the business, right? So, again, it really depends on the disability, but there's certain job functions that a disabled person probably wouldn't be able to do, and no reasonable accommodation would probably be able to accommodate for that. So it really is no one size fits all. But the law, as I remember it, was only that it had to make an unreasonable accommodation for somebody with a disability. Great question, though.
I also think that that would be a non-issue with a race, right?
Yeah, I don't know what a reasonable accommodation would be. Again, there's not race is not a disability. You know?
Right. So it wouldn't really there wouldn't be any reason to not hire somebody based on their skin tone. Like I can't think of a single reason, like even a fictitious one, that would be like, nah, bro.
Well, I mean, and the only place, I mean, I mean, if you were, let's say you were casting for a movie and you wanted to, like, you know, have a historical figure, right? I mean, obviously, then it does come into play. I mean,
Yeah, but that wouldn't be. We're not hiring you because of your skin tone. It's an integral part of the job at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
So it's not. It has nothing. I would say so, especially if you're trying to do something that is, again, this is a specific thing. It wouldn't apply to the majority of movies. The majority of movies, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but if you're going to tell a story of Malcolm X, you're not going to hire Brad Pitt to play him.
Oh God, could you imagine? Could you imagine the outrage of whitewashing Malcolm X?
Now,
God.
Obviously, there's sometimes where it works, like with Tropic Thunder. That was brilliant. I mean, that was.
It was also satire.
It was absolutely satire, and it's supposed to be exactly what it was. And I got to tell you, I didn't even know that that was what was his
Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. at the time. I had no idea. That's how good he played.
Well, you didn't notice? Did you not pay attention to the?
I saw it when it came out, so you know.
You didn't notice the trailer the trailers that were at the very beginning that it was him?
I don't remember. It's been so long. I like the movie.
You're Australian. Be Australian.
And you know what's funny is, and this kind of ties into the whole woke culture thing. Do you remember his famous line from that particular movie?
I'm just a dude disguised as a dude playing another dude.
Well, that was good. No, never go full retard.
Oh yeah.
You never go full retard. Remember? And of course that R word. If you say that on Twitter or you say that as
here, you just got us canceled. Good job, Steve.
Yeah. It's a cancellation thing. It doesn't matter how the word is used. It's wait a minute. You can't say the word. Well, yeah, actually you can, and it actually has actual usages, right? I mean, when you say something is retarded, you mean that it's been slowed down, right? When you say, hey, the volumetric flow is retarded through the pipe, that's perfectly fine. I mean, people know what you mean by it because that's how the word is generally used. But this woke culture is like you cannot say certain things, even in a proper context, or they'll shut you down. This is what happened with Michael
Sherlock.
Michael Sherlock, right? Because he used that word, and all of a sudden you had woke culture just condemning him left or right when there was an actual lawsuit going on at the time that was trying to save somebody's life, and they're more concerned about using the word retard. That to me is typifies what we mean by the church of the woke.
Drug out into the Twitter streets and flogged for you. I'd be curious to know what Mr. Serious thinks about this, so I'll ask briefly just to make it clear because I'm curious to what you think. There's when you get so obsessed with helping on why people are called keyboard warriors. You are so obsessed with saying what people cannot do or policing what people can and cannot do on a social forum behind your keyboard, never going out, not doing anything in your community. You're not actually a part of anything. You're just part of this mob and you're helping, but you're helping so much that you're actually causing detriment for people actually getting help that they need in life or death situations.
Yeah, because it means more important to them, these emotional and visceral reactions. Because I am completely convinced that the vast majority of the woke culture is predicated upon virtue signaling.
Well, the thing I would preface, so just so Mr. Serious can be clear. I feel like my question wasn't very clear. Is at what point is it? I tend to use is somebody actually being caused harm, or is there a victim here, or is this actually directing hate at people? That's kind of what I tend to use, but I'd be curious to know what you think.
This is what I think that this is what I guess woke culture, quote unquote. I guess this is what I think it is. It's a way to stop the conversation. Like the conversation's hard, let's not have it. As long as we just attack people, we don't have to worry about having a hard conversation about anything.
Yeah, you spend more time defending, right? You spend more time defending the against the accusations of the woke rather than actually having the discussion from the beginning. We saw that with, rationality rules and the atheists experienced kerfuffle. A lot of them didn't want to even have discussion. They're like, no, then they're just shutting it down by fiat. And there's certain people out there saying if you don't agree with us, you're just wrong. We're not even going to talk about it, and you're a homophobic, transphobic bigot kind of thing.
I think that it's okay to recognize when you are able to have a conversation. This is the difference between the individual and the group or the circle of people. If you're not comfortable and you, the individual, do not want to have that conversation, even if you think it's not an appropriate conversation to have, the proper response to that is to not have it and not involve yourself.
Yeah, just don't have the discussion.
If there is a group of people, that remove yourself from that group if you're not comfortable. And it doesn't mean you have to remove yourself. Like, say it's a group of friends, and this group of friends is doing something you think is inappropriate, but it's not harming anybody specifically. It is not. There is no harm happening here. If this group of people is making you uncomfortable, you can remove yourself from that conversation without dictating what this group of people can or cannot do. And it doesn't even mean you have to hate them forever. You can just be like, listen, this conversation makes me uncomfortable. But that would be the mature thing to do. Now, if you're going to talk about like out groups, so like groups that you're not necessarily a part of, that you're going to you've decided that you're going around and going and shutting them down from having the conversation because you don't like it as an individual, and you're going to dictate that, oh no, you're causing harm by doing this, but you cannot present any harm actually being done, then there's a decent chance that you're actually shutting down conversation that is ultimately going to help people. Yeah, either through education, either through exposure, either through like lots of different, even if somebody says something highly inappropriate. If somebody says something horribly, horribly racist. So let's say I bring Jeff. What's his last name? Nick Fluentes is the other guy. Jeff, the French guy. You know what I'm talking about? The ethnostate guy.
JF Garify.
Yes. So if I bring Jeff on and I'm going to have a conversation about ethnostates, and he says some horrible things about people and that there should be ethnostates, what have I done? Well, I've exposed that this guy thinks that they're ethnostates and that he's horribly racist. And let's talk about how racist this is or isn't and what is and is not acceptable. And now might never change his mind. But now you have a group of people who have a better understanding about what an ethnostate would cause or could mean and what the motivation is behind it, which makes them far more apt in making decisions and having conversations down the line. Even if it's a conversation that's like, you can't have that conversation because that guy's going to say something racist.
I mean, there's a difference between platforming somebody, giving them like a what do you call it, like a big soapbox to preach, or like confronting them on their beliefs. There's a big difference between those two things.
Yeah, and you got to be careful when you have people on too. If JF Garify comes on, which he's been on, the channel before. He was on the Non Sequitur Show channel.
He's on Non Sequitur.
Yeah, but the thing is that you're not giving them a place to preach, right? If you have somebody come on that you have diametrically opposite viewpoints on, you have them on to challenge them on those positions, right? When I have a young Earth creationist come on, you notice I don't get along. I don't get along. I get along fine. I don't allow them to sit there and do a soapbox, right? I don't allow them to sit there and bloviate over and over again the same things and the same points and the prats because they're not there to sermonize. They're not there to preach. They're there to defend their position that they're making a claim about the age of the earth or something like that. So it's perfectly fine to have these discussions, but like Cheshire said, some of these people have recused themselves from having the discussions. Either they're not competent enough to have it, they're incapable of having it, or their whole goal is just to go around and tell other people, you guys can't have this discussion. Right. And that's where I draw the line. Toxicity. Like you're allowed to not want to be part of the discussion. You're allowed to say that you're not mature enough for the discussion, or this is not something you're comfortable with. Now, it makes sense to maybe get out of your comfort zone a little bit, but this is something that seems to be the opposite of what people are attempting to dictate to other people. It's like, no, you should never be uncomfortable. No, you should never feel that you might not want something, or that everything should be
set up for you in a way that makes you, the individual, comfortable, no matter what it is. So like that nude color or whatever foundation, you're fearful. You should never feel uncomfortable ever, no matter where you go. I'm sorry. We live in a society. You're going to feel uncomfortable at some point in time, and learning to deal with that and learning to recognize what your boundaries are is important. You can just because you have a boundary here doesn't mean these people have a boundary over here. If you want me to spin this around the other direction, we can say, okay, this person isn't comfortable with two men kissing. Does that mean these two men shouldn't be allowed to kiss? No, of course not. They should absolutely be allowed to do whatever the hell they want, because they're not harming anybody.
This is actually something that I've encountered a little bit, being a disabled person who is still trying to get disability. So I'm not technically disabled according to the country, but I mean, trust me when I say there's not much that I can actually do. There are times when like I can't, there's a lot of things I can't do. And sometimes people would say something to the effect of, well, this should be this, or this should be that. So, you know, it could be catered to me. And I always think about, like when it comes to like my shoe size, I wear 13 and a half double wide shoes, and I can't find the shoes, okay, ever. Like I really have to like buy them online basically in order, and I barely can even find them there. But if I walked into a shoe store and every entire shoe there was 13 and a half double wide, that would make me most uncomfortable. Don't make a world that caters to me. That would make me more uncomfortable than anything ever. I want a world that caters to the most people possible, and I'm an outlier and I know it. I will get by. You guys should have the world for you. I will get by. That would make me the most comfortable.
Well, I mean, I think that people should be included as much as possible, right, in these conversations. And certain people, like for whatever reason, they don't want to be into them. That's perfectly fine. But I think the point we're making to people is that when we see people going around to these groups trying to cancel them rather than have the discussion, those are the people that are the antithesis of what I think to be free thinkers, right? Like the whole predication of like the whole American Humanist Association was based upon free thinking. It was, you know, the positions that people should be able to have alternative viewpoints and criticisms and positions. And so we're going to kind of dive into what actually happened with Twitter, because, you know, it's kind of the crux of all this. And I think it's a perfect example of how you have an organization
Twitter
that did exactly the opposite of what any rational organization should have done. It's been one of those things that has been very controversial. I mean, there's people on both sides. I mean, I've already had some words with people that, you know, disagree with me on this, and it's fine, right? By the way, I haven't blocked any of them. You know, there's a limit they can go, but I mean, most of them have been pretty cordial. But none of them have actually realized the whole point of these things like the humanist associations was to have discussions on things and to have diversifications of viewpoints, so you don't end up with religiosity, you don't end up with evangelism, you don't end up with cult-like mentalities, which, by the way, the entire New Atheist TM movement has basically embraced. They have embraced the same dogmatism as any evangelical group I've ever seen. Just Harris has pointed this out on her channel. Answers and Reason has pointed this out on their blogs, and other people have noticed the exact same thing. Nothing that I haven't been saying for the last couple of years, but people know I'm not a huge fan of Richard Dawkins, right? I mean, sure, he's a great biologist, but when it comes to philosophy, I don't agree with him on the vast majority of stuff he says. But he's allowed to say it, and I would never go for cancel culture. So he won an award from the American Humanist Association back in 1996 for the Humanist of the Year. Okay, the year. It wasn't even a lifetime award. It was for that year. He did some good stuff that they felt was appropriate and embody the ideals of this group. Okay, great. Nothing at that point afterwards should have changed that. I don't think you should go back and be able to retroactively remove an award when for what you've done in a year. Anything you've done after that, hey, that doesn't change what you did for the year. It just doesn't.
It does set a bad principle and not a very good policy, in my opinion. it's just
absurd.
odd.
If you win an
no
Emmy
matter
for,
whether
you win an Emmy for something and then you have you do some stupid show and it sucks and it bombs, do you lose the Emmy that you earned?
Oh, it's you could even go further. So let's say that Richard Dawkins did do whatever negative thing. And let's say it was actually even worse. Let's say it was let's say he walked into an orphanage of children and made them shoot each other, and it was Lord of the Flies and it was horrible. That doesn't mean that what he did over here wasn't good. Now, does that mean you should ignore that he did this thing over here? No. But does that mean you should ignore what he did over here? No. So there's a matter of, you've got situations where if you have, let's say, there was some controversy around a manga writer who wrote, I think it was Recovery of an MMO Junkie, I think is the name of the anime. I might be misremembering which one it was, but it was one of those. And turns out the dude's a horrible, misogynist racist. But his story was real. That stuff did not seep into his writing. At least not of that story. So does that mean that that story in and of itself is now bad? And that there was a lot of conversation that went around this of people saying that, no, you should never buy or look at or read any of this because that guy was involved. It's yeah, but he's not the only person involved. So should everybody who is part of the production suffer because one guy is racist in there? So if you have a movie and it's let's say it's Endgame, and it was huge, big box office, everybody made shitloads of money. Well, one guy was racist. Does that mean that everybody who worked and spent so much time producing, creating, putting their blood, sweat, and tears in this movie should not get paid, and the whole thing is ruined? It's not that simple, right?
Yeah, well, none of this stuff usually is. Chris Foster for $10. Thank you, Chris. He says, "Hi, Steve and Chesh. Happy Monday. Loving the new segment." Well, we appreciate that very much. We're trying to make this work. The thing that we need people to help with is getting the message out there for people to know about this particular show, because marketing is not my thing. I would really have to rely on people for help on that. So if you guys want to share this video and you want to let people know on Twitter and Facebook and you're on your community tabs for YouTube or anywhere that people see your stuff, shout us out. Please
Steve
do.
Exposed. He used the R word.
I need to be exposed. Yes, I use the R word appropriately. I know it cancel me. So the tweet that Richard Dawkins has that was the stirring of this controversy. Now I fully will probably admit that he was probably being a little provocative. I get that. He has but here's a guy that started his career outside of biology as a four horseman, right? I mean, he's somebody who is a new atheist that was a firebrand kind of person, much along the lines of David Silverman, and other atheist leaders that wanted to shake up the establishment when it came to religion. Most of them were anti-theist, in that they felt that religion was harmful. They felt that it had overall negatively affected the value of society, and it has caused harm. And so they were very in your face about religion. So this doesn't surprise me that, he wants to stir up a little bit. But in any kind of negative way or any kind of harmful way, no, I don't think so. I don't think Richard Dawkins in any way, shape, or form is a bigot, transphobe, or anything like that. If anything, he's an ally. But he wanted to make a point here, and I think that he did, from a biological standpoint. I mean, nothing he said is incorrect. That's the most amazing part. I mean, he didn't say anything that was wrong. But here's what the tweet said. In 2015, Rachel Dolezal, a white chapter president of the NAACP, was vilified for identifying as black. Some men choose to identify as women. Some women choose to identify as men. You will be vilified if you deny that. If you deny they literally are what they identify as. And there's a lot packed into that particular tweet. Now,
well, there's you should probably read the first half of the tweet, because you kind of have to take the whole thing as it is, right? Because he's making he's saying, well, in this, he's taking two scenarios, and he wants people to discuss why in this scenario is it this.
And then it says discuss. That is the first tweet, isn't it?
No, the first half of that tweet, he's talking about somebody who identified it as a different race.
Yeah. And then he says, discuss. Yeah. So what he's trying to make the point of this is that when
he's not trying to make a point.
Well,
he's asking a question.
Well, I think there's still a point to be made. I mean, and this is about vilification.
Sure, that's the discuss part.
Yeah, exactly. So, when Rachel Dolezal came out, and found out that she wasn't of African American descent, as she had claimed, even though let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that she really does believe that she identifies with the black culture and that she identifies as being black as a racial thing. There's something known as racial dysphoria. I'm not going to sit there and say whether this person is lying or not. I have no idea. Right. So let's give a little principle of charity, and maybe she actually does identify in that race, but she was vilified for it by the woke culture. This is what his point was trying to make. The woke culture vilified her for that. Okay, but they don't vilify people that will say anything about biological versus gender, right? Biological sex versus gender. And as a biologist, Richard Dawkins is well aware that biological sex, as far as gametic sex, in a dimorphic race, species, humans are going to be either male or female. There's no other options. Okay, when it comes to dimorphism as a species, he's well aware of this. And his point is, if you deny, if somebody speaks that, they're vilified for it. Right. And one of the things I noticed on the second sentence that Cheshire had pointed out the other day as well is he says some men choose to identify as women, and people were going, well, transgender is not a choice. And yet they're now categorizing everybody because some people do identify as a different gender. Some don't. And that is a choice when they decide to identify or not. And that's the outward manifestation of this, right? And I think that point is lost upon a lot of people. I think they don't get that not every transgender is the same. Not every one of them thinks the same. And I think this American Humanist Association just put them in one big general categorization.
We've personally even known and had these discussions with people who no longer want to be associated with us, so I won't bring up their names, and that's fine. But we've had discussions with them where they've been vilified because they're trans people who don't agree.
Look at Buck Angel. Exactly.
Buck Angel also, is a fantastic example of that. Buck Angel has their own views on these things that do not agree. And Buck, from his Twitter, is far more like, no, we need positivity. No, we do need people to recognize the biological differences, because if we don't recognize those biological differences and we try to deny our history and our past about who we were and try to pretend that doesn't exist, then it's bad for us in the future as the individual and as a group. And we can't go and step on other people's experiences because we are now identifying in this way. So if a woman says, hey, I had this experience growing up that you don't have access to, you can't say, well, I'm a woman, how dare you say that to me? They did.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, why would you want to vilify somebody like Buck Angel, who is clearly
what an advocate.
Yeah, an advocate.
What an advocate. Yeah.
And just because he has a different viewpoint than some other trans people doesn't mean that his viewpoint should be invalidated or in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's what we mean by this woke culture. The other day, somebody had mentioned that we didn't kind of solidify what we meant by that. And, that's a fair point. But I think the woke culture is solidified by typification of things like cancel culture, that if you do not say what we agree, whatever we are, whatever the masses are of that particular group allow for, if you go against that in any way, that is heretical. That is the woke culture. You're not allowed to have dissent among the masses. Now, we've all experienced this ourselves. I've experienced it with the atheist community for years, right? And even though I'm not an atheist, I'm still a non-believer, right? But that's not good enough. Even though they define, it's so funny, they define atheism as non-belief. I'm not one of them because I have dissent among the ranks, right? And so that's fine. I don't care. I don't want to be associated with a lot of these groups. But this is what we see with happening with Richard Dawkins with the Humanist Association. He has thoughts that do not comport with for whatever they think is the appropriate way to think, even though they advocate for free thinking. What they should have done is this. This is what Richard Dawkins is saying. We don't particularly agree with it, but let's give the reasons why. Matter of fact, he had a follow-up tweet, and I don't have it available. Maybe Cheshire has it. But he had followed it up with something like, look, if you disagree, explain with something. Use logic. Use your words to disagree with somebody, right? Not destroy their legacy. I mean, like him or hate him, Richard Dawkins has a huge impact on people. He has a legacy, you know? And to try to destroy that legacy towards the end of his career, just because he has a tweet that you don't particularly agree with, that is not free thinking.
I don't think that there wasn't really anything to agree or disagree with that tweet, though. The only thing you could possibly, the only like claim or statement he made within that tweet is that this person was vilified and you will be vilified if this. So those are the only two claims that are actually in there. So, but nobody denied any of that. Nobody denied any claim about people getting vilified in one way or another, which was what the tweet was about. So it's bizarre to me that you have. He didn't make any statement about trans people. He didn't say that you can't identify this way or you're that. And so I was watching Brittany Simon the other day, and she made a really good point that just because you think somebody that or think something or say something that a bigot would say doesn't make you a bigot. These are two separate things. If you have somebody who is like a horrible racist and they have this argument or they can use that argument, it doesn't mean if you also think that thing you are a bigot, because you can simply just not hate people and simply not have any, like that one thing does not necessarily translate, right? So if I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. If I say that I think that it is important to recognize biological gender, and somebody says, well, that's what a transphobic person might say with a transphobic agenda. It's like, I mean, they might, but that doesn't make me transphobic.
Yeah,
because I think there's importance here.
Just because you know certain things that some piece of crap person might use as a weapon doesn't negate the point or the facts of the matter, right? Again, you don't want to change the facts. You don't want to like misrepresent reality. What you want to do is explain to people, this is the reality. When people weaponize it, that's the problem. Go after the people weaponizing this kind of stuff, right? That's somebody that everybody would probably get on board with. And I see people, for some strange reason, going out of their way to alienate people rather than include them as allies. Because I guarantee it, if you ask Richard Dawkins his positions on all this stuff, he would be outraged by people that are bigoted, people that are transphobic, people that are homophobic, right? Because he's never been a person to go out and say, look, being gay is wrong. No, he's an evolutionary biologist. He understands that these things are very natural things. And so why would you go out of your way as a group to basically say, look, you've committed a heresy, especially on a group that's supposed to be dedicated to having difference of opinions. Now somebody wrote this the other day, and I think it was, and again, I don't know if they were being serious or not. I don't know. I know the person. I kind of know them. And so it's hard for me to tell though if they were serious or not. But somebody had something like, well, there's certain things just by saying discuss doesn't make it right. And that's true, by the way. And one of his things he said, like, the Jews shouldn't have been, killed in the Holocaust or something like that. Discuss. Yes, clearly there's certain things that are just, why bother having that discussion, right? I mean, they're very hyperbolic. But here I think Dawkins is literally actually trying to make some kind of point about why is it that the woke community has vilified somebody in this instance, right, but doesn't vilify in this instance when both of them do deal with how somebody has identified as.
Well, and the thing is right? That I've had people say, well, you're comparing apples and oranges. It's like, you can have a discussion comparing apples and oranges.
Sure.
You can have that discussion. It doesn't mean that he's falsely equating these things, because he's saying, hey, these are two situations. You tell me, why is this situation this way and why is this situation this way? Because when you compare apples and oranges and say they're the same thing, then it's false equivalence. But Richard Dawkins didn't say they were the same thing. He presented one situation, he presented another situation and said, you tell me, you discuss, you tell me why this situation is treated this way and why this situation is treated this way. If he says that, oh no, if he then decides in the discussion to make further either comparisons or further claims about those situations, then sure. But in that initial tweet, he's just presenting you two situations, and then you can tell him if you feel like it, why is this different than this? Or what makes this situation different from this? Are there justifications why this person should be vilified and this person shouldn't? Or maybe there's reasons why neither should be vilified, or maybe both should be vilified. You tell me why. And so the preconceived notions and the baggage that people had indicate why they reacted and how they reacted to something that was actually benign in making any statement about this or that. Right.
Yeah. Real quick, I think the point to be made on that is that either both should have been vilified or neither either. There has to be a consistency there. And this is one thing Chester and I point out a lot about the inconsistency of people's systems. I don't think that anybody would have made it.
You're inconsistent.
Well, I don't think anybody would have cared if somebody would have said, when it came to Rachel Dolezal, Dolezal, I guess I pronounced her name. If they would have said, hey, she identifies as this, great. She's allowed to. If the woke community hadn't vilified her, and again, there might be more to it, right? There's maybe some deception there. I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to levy my personal views on whether she lied or not, whether she was being deceptive about it or not. I'm going to give right now the benefit of the doubt because I don't recall exactly how that kind of transpired. But let's say, just arguendo, that she literally does believe she is of a specific race that she has identified as. The woke community probably should have just said, okay, fine, great, not a problem. Especially if she was really good at the job, right? But anyways, we do have another caller that has called in real quick. If you want to weigh in a little bit. Hello, new caller.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, who's this?
Yeah, that's Darth myself.
It's who?
Darth myself.
Darth myself is what he said.
Darth.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I would like to weigh in a bit on the Dawkins issue. In my opinion, he made one big mistake, which is expecting to have any discussion on Twitter, because I don't believe it's a platform where
That's a fair point.
You can actually discuss anything. It's like people put statements on Twitter with the limited characters and all these things. There's no room actually for discussion. And I would prefer, like, if he would like to expand on, maybe he has like a forum or something, maybe he would advertise it on Twitter and post his elaborated opinion. Because as we saw, the fallback from this was the what we call this, transphobes or anti-trans people took it as, oh, look at Dawkins, he's siding with us. And the woke people took it as so. But it's like nobody's going to discuss anything in that issue.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Look, we agree.
There's extremists. There's extremists on both sides, and both sides have an agenda, and both sides are trying to utilize whatever Dawkins said, even though it was very central, are trying to pull whatever he said to either side of their argument. Basically, both of them are trying to shut down the conversation. Both of them are trying to make sure nobody can have the conversation. So both of them can say, look at that group, they're the bad people. Look at that group, they're the bad people. And the extremists on both sides are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, well, both of them are trying to weaponize it, right? I mean, again, this goes back to the whole point of sectionality, where you're talking about privilege versus persecution. Who can weaponize the greatest, thing? Who can take this and make the most yarn out of it, as they would say, right? Who can never let something, a bad thing go to waste, right? Never let a bad event go to waste, or whatever it is. Because again, this is something that they say, look, here he said this, let's use it to our advantage, and try to weaponize it. And this is what the woke community has done. But you're right, Twitter's not the place for this. Obviously, you have character limits, and he knows this, but we all know this, and we all use Twitter as a sandbox.
Yeah, especially that he knows, that I assume he knows that this topic is already sensitive. Plus,
absolutely, yeah, he's aware of that.
As I believe, like within a few days, some states in the U.S. Did some legislation against trans people. So it's like the timing, the platform, everything's not working in that situation.
Yeah, all right.
I think that there's also something to be said about there's something about like lobbing a grenade to be like, hey, I'm curious about this. Let's see what people have to think, and then putting that out there and letting people discuss. And it's another thing for the AHA to respond in such like a horrendous way over nothing. Like the only way this got blown up and out of proportion into what it is because of the AHA responding the way they did.
In my opinion, course, that was a very stupid, thing to do.
Yeah, in my opinion, the real problematic behavior is there. I expect woke extremists to be extremist. I expect bigoted, transphobic extremists to be extremist. The AHA, which is about helping people, ought not to be shutting down conversation, especially retroactively and going out of their way to punish somebody for not thinking what they think. In that kind of way. I think that's the problem.
Well, what do they accomplish by this? What do they think they were trying to accomplish, and what do you think they did accomplish, if anything? Or because to me, I think it had the most backfiring effect of all time. I mean, they didn't accomplish anything. All they did was show what I've been pointing out for the very long time. Other people have weighed in on this as well. David Silverman agreed. Stephen Peaker agreed. There's a whole bunch of people that have weighed in, and some of them have been winners of this award before, and they all stand by Richard Dawkins on this. And again, I want to make it very clear, as somebody who's not a huge fan of Dawkins' writings,
I think
why would you vilify him?
What good does this do? I think people have focused on one side of the conversation, and it's comparing these two things. And so they're saying that it's a false equivalence because you're saying compare these two situations. It's like compare and contrast. He didn't say you have to compare these things and tell me why they're the same. He's saying compare and you tell me why these situations are different, which is not a false equivalence, right? If I hand you an apple and an orange and I say discuss an apple and an orange, you can compare and contrast them. Nothing says that I'm saying they're the same thing, right?
So what is the point of them?
So it's not an equivalence.
But why are they vilifying him then? I mean, all they had to do was say, look, what is it you're trying to say here, Richard? Let's do what you want. Let's compare and contrast. Let me show you why you're wrong logically, or reason, whatever they want to show to say that, look, we find this tweet to be incorrect in this, right? But that's not what they did. They shut down conversation. They're like, hey, look, you're wrong by fiat. We're not even going to engage you on this. We're not going to give an explanation why. We're just going to strip you of the award, and we're going to try to vilify you to virtue signal to other people in the organization. I don't see how that makes them look good. Makes them look petty. Makes them look the antithesis of what their original mandates were for. Matter of fact, somewhere it actually even showed their original manifesto, so to speak. And it was basically, again, to foster this type of ability to have different beliefs and ideologies and question things without being treated like some kind of pariah. Because this is what we see church people do. If you violate their doctrine, if you question their doctrine, you're excommunicated. How many times have we seen this? I don't understand why they're doing exactly what they tell other people that they shouldn't do. They become what they despise for some reason. And again, not just me saying this. This is a whole bunch of people that have won this award. They're saying the exact same thing.
Well, I mean, I've seen this. This has happened quite a lot, even recently. For a lot of people, like it's been weird almost. Like Gina Carano is kind of another person that kind of got targeted by Disney, even though other people who work for them said equally or even more terrible things and are fine, totally working for them, totally cool. And now they're kind of trying to uncancel her. Putting her toys back on shelves, saying that she can come back if she wants, my bad. It's like people are overstepping and being called out for overstepping, and they're kind of realizing that doing this kind of stuff is shitty, and it is.
Yeah, there is a line there that you can find what somebody said not acceptable, and you can have that discussion with that person if they're receptive to the conversation. A conversation goes both ways. You can't just dictate to people. If you want somebody to change an attitude or change a behavior, you want to have a discussion with somebody. You don't get to preach at them. You don't get to say, "Hey, no, listen, you're not allowed to have this conversation because I don't like the way you phrased that thing." Well, you're tone policing at that point, essentially, and so you can say that, hey, I don't think what you said is unacceptable, and here's why. And you can have that discussion with that person, provided they're open to that discussion. And you can't force them to have that discussion. You can then talk about it, though, amongst your groups and say, hey, listen, I think that Richard Dawkins said this or said that, and this is what I think is acceptable, and this is what I think isn't acceptable. This is why I think those things. Then you're opening up to that discussion also, though. So now people are also going to be able to come to you to say, hey, listen, I think you're wrong, and here's why I think you're wrong. And that's how conversation works. It goes both ways. And so you do end up in these situations where you disagreeing with somebody or thinking what they said was inappropriate, jumping to cancel culture, jumping to you're a bad person, jumping to vilification might not be the right thing to do. Now, somebody could make an error. Somebody could say something in not the best way, but do you then jump to they're transphobic, they're a bigot, they should be shut down, they should never be able to speak again, they should lose all their endorsements, they should do that. That is an extreme response to something that is mundane at best, I would say, in Richard Dawkins' case.
Yeah, I want to
especially when you take into consideration who's talking. So there are people who are like immediately jumping to him saying anything about gender to immediately meaning gender identity. When he's a biologist, he's an older gentleman, so it's more likely what this man is talking about is biological gender, not gender identity. And so when you try to falsely equate, you want to talk about false equivalence, gender, biological gender and gender identity, and then vilify somebody for using one thing when you're forcing them to mean this in your brain, that's a you problem.
Yeah, and you know, whether Rachel Dolezal, you know, whether she was vilified for lying or not, I don't think is the issue, right? I mean, let's say that she did lie about everything, right? And that she could perfectly fine to be vilified for that. But the point being made is, should she be vilified if it is the case, right, for having what would be called, I guess, racial dysphoria, right? I mean, if she does identify, that was the discussion. People were vilifying her for saying that's not a thing, right? It wasn't just for her lying or misrepresenting or changing her history. Well, I mean, sure, vilify her for that. That's fine. But in addition to that, people were actually bringing up this actual discussion of, can somebody identify as being another race? This was not just, you know, a one-shot topic thing. This had been brought up many times before. And so that is a discussion to be had. I don't see any issue having a discussion. Can somebody have racial dysphoria? Okay, let's discuss it, right? Why is that any more off the table than anything else? And if you disagree with it and you say, look, no, you can't have it. Okay, explain why. Because not everybody's going to have an opinion on that yet. And maybe you need to have a discussion so they can determine, is this something that actually is a legit thing? Should it something that does exist? But to just outright, you know, say, hey, look, we're not going to have this discussion. That's just shutting down communications.
Well, you can say that for yourself, but you're not allowed to dictate that to anybody else. That's not acceptable. Inkboy for 5 says, I believe that woke culture crowd are committing a very slow seppuku with figuratively rusty spoons they themselves smithed. Oof.
Yeah, I mean,
now, I would like to say something a bit controversial. Like, I live and I am from the Middle East, and although I cannot stand the woke culture as I see it in the United States or in Europe sometimes, but funny enough, I would wish that we had like 10% of the woke movement to be in the Middle East a bit, because the atmosphere here, the discussions are on a different level. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I look.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. And this is the problem. This is what we were talking about with Landon the other day. It's the difference between these people are so busy on Twitter saying that our American culture and our way of thinking is the right way, and nobody else can behave in any other way because we're the Americans. We know what's right and what's wrong, and you have to behave the way we're telling you to behave, even if you're from a different country, instead of doing anything that would actually be useful anywhere else.
Yeah, in every movement, there's a grain of things that probably have some good points, right? And I'm on board with you. Maybe the Middle East can use a little wokeism. That's fine. But unfortunately, it has run amok in political culture and PCism
It's easy.
in America.
It's easy to go after people. You're taking something that would be incredibly difficult. Like if you're going to go into the Middle East and you're going to have discussions about trans people, you're going to go to the Middle East and you're going to have a discussion about gay people. You're going to go to the Middle East and have a discussion about any other like different religions. You're going to have a bad time. You're going to have a difficult time trying to have those conversations. Those are hard conversations to deal with and hard conversations to have. But on top of that now, instead of doing that, we've got woke culture people going around saying that this person can't say this word because he's a bad person. And in doing so, by saying this and getting in the way of that person's work and who they are, they're actually causing a detriment in the Middle East for the good that that person is trying to do when it comes to religion. These people are problematic by behaving this way. It makes it that they feel good about themselves. They feel self-righteous because they're helping people. Nobody asked for their help. Nobody asked them to speak for them.
I mean, the religious bigots, let's say, that are here in the region, when they get wind of these little things that happen in the U.S. and these woke things, they use this as to reinforce for their people, like, look at what these degenerates are discussing and look how they're behaving, and that way. So in their behavior, they're giving a very negative aspect of or blocking any progress that might happen here.
Right. Yeah. And that's a real conversation. This is why Steve and I talk about this kind of stuff. Did anybody actually hear what he just said? Because that's important. That was huge. This is somebody who's from the Middle East saying that people behaving this way, even just on Twitter, is blocking progress because it's stopping people from having difficult conversations that would be helpful elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, and it goes to I think they're very short-sighted, right?
What more do you want?
Even if they're having conversations in the Arab world that you personally do not think is the appropriate conversation to be had or the result you want, the mere fact they're even discussing it is a huge improvement over anything else, right? It's over. You've got to start somewhere, right?
No, it differs from country to country. Like there's more countries that are more open. Like I'm from Lebanon, so my country is a bit more open to these discussions. But like I work in somewhere in the Gulf area, sorry, and like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. These you can't even discuss anything outside of what the government allows you. Like you discuss your latest phone model, your latest car. That's what you're allowed to discuss. Not allowed to discuss anything culturally or related to religion or anything else.
Yeah, and by the way, I had this discussion about free speech absolutism on Rum and Coke the other night with Landon, and I unfortunately cannot move myself to free speech absolutism. I think there has to be some kind of restrictions for any kind of society. And, one of the things that keep bringing up is something like, a Holocaust denier, which, by the way, I won't even platform. I won't even have that discussion. And people may find that hypocritical, but it's not. There's certain discussions that have been around for so long, right? There's nothing more to be added for value to it. Right? I don't see any value to having certain discussions. Doesn't mean I will tell people that they can't have it. Right? You want to go on
that's the
channel,
line, right?
And that's my line. If you want to go on your channel, you want to have a discussion about it, knock yourself out. Right? I'm not my brother's keeper. I just particularly won't. And should there be some kind of ramifications societally wise? Yes. Society has spoken out on certain stuff, right? It's not the cancel culture as an, oh, you have a different opinion than mine. There are things that I think that are objectively to me, not up for discourse, right? If you want to deny the
Well,
Holocaust, I think that there
yeah.
will be backlash from that.
There's also a difference between discussing something that is, one, an actual fact, or two, something that is still developing. Trans rights and activism
It's a
for
progressive
women
thing,
and gay
yes.
people is a progressive, this is a thing that is still going. And when you shut down conversations, you shut down that progress. You slow that progress down. You make that progress more difficult. Now, that does not mean you should go out and have conversation with every single person, because some people are not worth having conversations with. That's up to you to decide as the individual. But you don't get to say that other person can't talk to that person because reasons. You can say that's your opinion, but you can't dictate to that other person.
Yeah.
You can't say, hey, listen, I think that this person over on the corner should be able to just shout racial slurs all day, all night, and follow people around and be a complete asshole. No. You can say that that's not acceptable, and you can easily explain why that is not acceptable, and you can decide whether or not you choose to engage with that person. If you want to try and have a conversation with them, either change their mind or change the minds of people around them, that's fine. But these are all choices that are made by the individual. And then you've also got a situation where somebody might actually be causing harm, might actually be dangerous. Richard Dawkins, not dangerous. There is nothing. The only danger that existed was the perceived danger that both extremist sides were creating on their own without his involvement.
Yeah, and he even noted that the Republican Party or the Conservative Party might prop what he set up inappropriately, and he spoke out against that, right? Which is what you do. You say, look, these are the words I've said. These are the context. This is my position. And if somebody uses it as a weapon, I'm going to speak out against that, right? That's what you need to do. That's what you say. Look, this racist group is taking my words and using them incorrectly and inappropriately for their own agenda, and I am vehemently against their platform. I am against their ideologies, right?
That's the stuff that Trump was expected to do when the KKK was like, yeah, that guy.
Well, he didn't, right? I mean,
but he didn't.
He didn't denounce these people, and that's when people went, wait a minute here. Why is he not denouncing these people? Because most normal people are going to be going, hey, look, we're not going to support you, white supremacist. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. We're going to denounce that stuff.
So,
right?
What were you going to say, Mr. Serious?
I'm not certain if it's just the extremists that were the issue. This is where I think that I don't know about woke culture in general, but this specific case, I think that a lot of this sprung from righteous indignation, which is something I see a lot from religious crowds, where people will they'll be angry for other people, but these people were doing this for themselves. This was very it was a call to arms. They're gonna be the hero. I'm the hero. Look at me saving the trans people from this hate speech that I found from this big a big guy. I'm the little guy. I'm the underdog, and I'm gonna topple this king over here because I'm the hero. Look at me go. And that's all this was. It was a bunch of selfish, immature douchebags, and that's all this entire thing was.
It is very much a look how good of a person I am to these poor people who can't defend themselves masturbation session.
But what that does is, and this is the way I see it, these people are the most transphobic people in the freaking world, because they look at trans people and they say, look at those people who can't defend themselves. I'll do it. They're weak. I'll do it.
Yeah, they want to be the hero,
These
right?
people-
They want to
these
think
people-
everybody needs their help, right?
It's infantizing, like you're treating them as if they're children. This is a pretty regular thing that women
All the
groups
time.
end up dealing with a lot of the time, is people infantilizing them. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Well, let me mansplain to you what she's trying to say here. So,
Fuck off.
Yeah, no, from my personal observation as an outsider, the way I've seen it, as Mr. Sirius was saying, like the most outrage comes from not like from the trans community or from the gay community or from any minority community, although they might have their reactions, but it's the quote unquote allies who would be the most outrageous and vocal, and they're the one who are doing the most harm for the community that they're trying to quote unquote defend.
Yeah, I couldn't
Well,
agree
what
more.
happens? What happens to a trans person who agrees with what Richard Dawkins said? You tell me.
They get
This is an
alienated
open-ended
too.
question. This is an
Yeah,
open-ended question.
They're not
I want
trans enough for some people.
Well, I want the chat to sort of think about that, and the people watching and people who watch this later. What happens when this mob of people goes after Richard Dawkins, who has an idea about gender identity versus gender biology, and he speaks in that gender biology standard and by that standard, or somebody who thinks that maybe trans people shouldn't be vilified or people speaking about this shouldn't be vilified? What if you're a trans person who wants to have the conversation? They're like, no, I want to talk to Richard Dawkins. I want to have that conversation with him. I want to explain to him what I think is right and what I think is wrong. Or maybe I agree or disagree about the comparing, the contrasting, because I value this conversation. I think it will help educate people about me and my stances. And now they can't have that conversation.
Yeah, and let me point this out, because somebody in the live chat said maybe you should have a trans person on instead of talking about trans issues you don't understand. Well, first of all, we've talked about these issues for many years, and I think we do have a pretty good understanding of them. However, we have open lines.
Yeah,
Anybody
any
can
trans
call
person
in.
can call.
I mean, so how are we precluding anybody from calling in? Sure. If a trans person wants to call in,
It's Steve's fault. It's Steve's
I have
fault.
a lot of trans supporters. I mean,
I actually have a question. How do you know neither of the callers are trans?
Yeah, I mean, you don't. We don't.
It's on
and also on top of that, we're not talking about trans issues. We're talking
Correct.
about cancel culture,
Yeah,
and we're talking
exactly.
about the
Yes.
allies mostly. We're not even
very
bringing
important
up trans issues at all. So why?
Yeah, it's really not even
people
about
listening?
trans issues. It is about the whole idea behind if you say something against the ruling class, the dogma of whatever group that you're a part.
Nikki's in the chat now. Nikki's like, I've been lurking the whole time.
Yeah, Nikki's
Hi,
here.
Nikki.
I mean, Nikki's my mod. I love her to death. I mean, she can call in anytime she wants. But I don't understand why people don't separate the fact that it has nothing to do with trans issues. It has nothing to do with even gay issues or woman issues or anything. It is about people shutting down conversation that they particularly do not like to have themselves, and they want to go around telling everybody else they can't have it. That's exactly.
Could
what
you
it boils down to.
imagine? Could you
Just like the
imagine
people in the
people
chat.
saying? Could you imagine people saying that you can't have a conversation about Star Wars because I say so?
Oh God!
Ink Boy for
Whoa,
Five
whoa,
said,
whoa, whoa,
if
whoa,
you-
whoa, whoa,
I went too far.
whoa. There's
Too
a
far.
Darth in the chat.
Ink Boy for Five said, if you want to see how polarizing this topic is, just look at the like to dislike ratio under this stream. Right, which is why you should have the conversation.
I don't
It's
bother.
polarizing.
I usually turn them off. But by the way, yeah, get some likes on there. I haven't looked what it is. I have no idea right now. I haven't looked. Got too many things to make this all happen.
Steve, focus on producing.
Okay, excuse me, guys. I need to run. It was nice talking to you. Hope to catch you in another episode.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciated what you had to say.
Okay.
Please feel free to call again sometime. That's fantastic.
Sure. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Oh, look, we got permission from a trans person to be allowed to have this conversation.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Trans person approved. Yeah.
This stream is trans person approved. Stamp.
But here's the thing.
God.
She also knows we're going to talk about what the hell we want to talk about, because that's what we do. And I would not want people to think that they can dictate what we can and cannot talk about, because I would never be so presumptuous to tell them what they can and cannot talk about. What's the difference?
Bearded
It's called
Heretic.
mutual respect.
Bearded Heretic asks a really good question in the chat. It says, Steve, do you think the minorities are the ruling class? So that's actually really interesting, because right now they might not be the ruling class, but what they do have right now is they have the largest voice right now. Like currently minorities, I'm not going to say every single minority, but those minorities are currently the ones with the microphone, and that's a lot of power, and they can use that microphone, and people are listening to what trans people have to say, people are listening to what gay people have to say, people are listening to what the minorities have to say. And that did they have to fight for that microphone, and do they have to fight to keep hold of that microphone? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
10 out of 10.
And I don't know if it's like the ruling class, but it is in certain subgroups, right? The humanist organization, that's their ruling class. If you take that as a set, and then in that group you have the people that they won the award, and anybody who seems to have dissension, they get the award stripped from them. So even they may not be the ruling class as far as like overall, but I'm talking about the microcosm. And somebody says, wow, that's actually transphobic now with those comments. I can guarantee there's no transphobic comments ever in my live chat. My mods would not allow it. You see all those people with blue wrenches? None of them support transphobia. Every one of them is an ally to the LGBTQ community plus.
I don't know if they're talking about the chat or us, because we said that this stream is trans approved.
How is that transphobic?
I have no idea.
Yeah, it just boggles my mind that people have to make outrage for something.
Godless Scummer, best comment. That's the best comment of the stream. Be careful, you may be in violation of the Extreme Transphobic Hatreds Emergency Law or Ethel Act.
I remember the Ethel Act. I remember that. Yes, that was. Oh man, the Ethel Act.
Puck is here. Do you guys want to see Puck?
Oh yeah, we don't want to violate the Ethel Act. Definitely. That was brilliant, Godless Scummer. I totally forgot about that.
It's amazing.
Yeah, making up outrage is the number one thing you can do to hurt the trans community.
That's exactly what ethicists thought was doing when they were trying to say, look, you can't have. Their motto was this. Ethel. It goes by what is Ethel? Peter, right? Peter or Ethel. He or she goes by both. They don't have a preferred pronoun, they even said. But
that's what they use. I don't know if that's what they currently say, but that's what they did say.
They changed it on the fly. But
I'm not sure.
But Essence of Thought used to go around saying, if you disagree with us, regardless of what you have to say, you're transphobic, and we're going to vilify you. Period. And even other people that were, advocates and trans themselves were trying to explain to him, no, what you're saying is misinformation. We don't agree with you, but no, it was all to virtue signal to his little microcosm of people. And if you dare speak out against him, man, would he viciously go after people. Him and Godless Cranium. It was bizarre back then. But I think I think there's good that came out of it. I think a lot of people recognize this type of behavior, and they said, no, this is not acceptable. This is not how you want to have discourse. This is not how you should properly address if you disagree with somebody. What you should do is explain to people why that person is incorrect, why their thoughts are inappropriate, why their uses of words are inappropriate. Even if there's no objective fact to be matter to be had, even if it's completely subjective, but you have your positions and how you use certain words. Like I won't use the word queer in conversation, even though it's perfectly acceptable now, right? Back in my day, that was a pejorative. It was invective. It was a slight. I didn't use it then. I'm not going to start using it now. If somebody says, hey, Steve, you're not going to refer to them as queer, you're being homophobic or you're being, some kind of bigot. No. How is choosing not to use a word that is my choice not to use bigoted? That makes absolutely no sense, right? That is my choice not to use a certain word.
There's one thing
to be a morally vile word because of how it was used way back when. Other people, but I don't go around saying you can't use it.
There are some cases where it's just disrespectful by ignoring people's pronouns. It's my choice to use or not use certain words. Fuck you. The important part of that is the fuck you part, right? It's not the I choose to use or not use specific terminology. So if somebody says, hey, I actually go by this name, and I use he or she, if you choose not to use he or she because fuck that person, you're a bigot. You're the asshole because your reasoning is fuck that person. And you're the dick.
But I love the go-to.
It's not that complicated.
It's like if you disagree, you've got to be a right-wing person. I'm a centrist. I'm socially left-leaning, fiscal conservative. I'm anti-Trump. And so it's like, I think everybody in my live chat, I don't think we have too many Trump supporters, but if they were, hey, have a discussion, man. My roommate's a Trump supporter. You know what? We've never had words. you know, we don't agree, obviously, but just because you people will say certain things that you disagree with doesn't mean all of a sudden they have some kind of political ideology. My political ideology does not lean toward the Republican Party because it's been completely decimated as opposed to what it was when I grew up in the Reagan era, right? A Reagan Republican is not the same as a Trump Republican. They're not remotely similar to each other.
I'm kind of curious to have Verdant call in if they want. Like, the number is there because they're saying that outrage culture is a right-wing straw man, but I'm pretty sure we've been saying that there's extremists on the woke side that are outraged, and on the right side that are like the thing is there's
left-leaning people that
I don't. I'm really confused. Yeah, I'm really confused. We're not talking about right-wing culture right now. I'm so so I'd love to have them call in and maybe I miss some of this stuff. Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding what they're saying, so maybe they can call in and clear that up.
The number's on the screen, and you also got the links in the video description. And we have, I know this person. I'm just going to say we have Zeshi on the line.
Hello, I am Zessi.
Hey,
oh my God, yes.
For using text to speech, but I am doing it for reasons. Can tell you in private later.
Okay.
Oh my God, I love this. I'm so happy. This is my favorite thing so far. Yes, please.
All right, talk to us, Zeshi.
What do you got? It's gonna take a minute.
I really don't understand why so many atheists have problems with logic.
I wish I knew too. I really do. Boy, that's not...
I think I might be able to answer that question. I think I know why, and it's when people or groups like the ACA go for quantity over quality. They're not taking any time to sort of debrief people that are coming out of religious situations and religious thinking and dogmatism, and they're just taking advantage of that in now a different direction instead of actually debriefing and helping people learn to do better. They're just like, you're better now because you're an atheist, so they don't have to do anything, and it's easy. It's the same kind of thing that you see with the keyboard warrior stuff. It's easy, and you don't have to actually do anything.
Yeah, they don't want,
and you get to feel good about yourself.
I straight up believe this now, and I hate to have to come to that conclusion, but as somebody who writes, you know, very basic logical proofs, and I have, you know, these awesome arguments that, again, people, you know, talk about frequently. They don't want people to learn the logic, because they'd be like, oh yeah, well, you know, Steve's logic is right. You know, he's correct on this. They don't want that, because then they would have to recognize that they've been putting out misinformation for a very long time. And unlike, you know, other groups that if they get something wrong, that will correct it, their whole model is based upon their positions and their dogmatic thinking. So yeah, I mean, when you say that, you know, you don't understand why atheists, you know, don't want to actually learn logic, because they don't want to be the people that they claim to be. They don't want to be the rational, critical thinkers. They just want to hold a particular position by fiat and not have anybody question that. And if you do, you're heretical, right? You're being excommunicated from that particular group. I mean, how many atheist groups have I been kicked out of for being correct? I've lost count. I mean, they oh, well, it's Steve's trolling, and yet when they are asked, well, how is Steve's logic, you know, wrong? They have the most dumbest things I've ever heard in my life that have absolutely nothing to do with my argument, or they just don't understand the argument, which now, again, I have put out, if you want to come after me, my arguments, if you cannot.
But now we've got Steve on about.
I'm not going to have that discussion. Well,
and now we've got Steve on about atheism.
Yeah. Zeshi, all right, so what else you got for us, Zeshi? Typing.
I have problem with one thing.
Just one.
And that is death.
Death?
That's a thing.
We all got a problem with death. It sucks. It's a bad design.
Listen, please shuffle me out of this mortal coil so I don't have to deal with this shit anymore.
Yeah,
get me out.
It's a really bad design. I mean, that's one thing. If I ever had a chance to talk to God, if he exists, to be like, what are you thinking? And especially because everything has to die. Even the universe eventually has to die, and we, you know, it's funny is we only exist for like 0.0000001% of the entire lifetime of the universe. The lifetime of the universe is supposed to be like trillions and trillions and trillions and hundreds and trillions of years, and yet life as we know it only has existed like, no.
Well, do you mean like death from an atheistic standpoint, or do you mean death from like what about death? Because that's such a big thing. Could mean anything. I'm gonna be really upset if my plants die. I planted some more. I got a really tall beanstalk, but sure, that's not what you mean.
How can I stop being so damn afraid? Any suggestions?
Oh, being afraid of death?
I don't want to live 100 years, 1,000 years, but forever.
I wouldn't want to live forever, and let me explain to you why. The universe is going to be around forever, and you're being a sea of nothing. That would suck. You know, the Earth isn't going to be around in 5 billion years, so, you know, nothing wants to live forever. And also, I don't know if you ever watched the Good Place. They make a very good argument about if you did actually have some kind of eternity, what value would it have? Because you would have done everything, seen everything. You know, what good does it even have at that point? But you know, I'm not really scared of death because I recognize it has to be. Everybody has ever lived has died. I'm not anybody special, and this is how I reconcile it. I'm nobody special. Just like anybody else, I'm going to die. Just like, you know, every human that has ever lived prior and ever will be. And to think otherwise, you know, is egoism. So I have to just come to that rationalization, that conclusion, and, you know, make the most of the life as you have it, right? I mean, that's the big thing to take away from it, is knowing that eventually you will expire. Hey, while you're not, do something. And I do think we give value. I had this discussion with Brittany Simon that Cheshire I mentioned earlier. I uploaded it on my video channel, and it's also on hers if you want to go check it out. But a great discussion on spirituality. And I think a lot of things for spirituality is how we treat other people. And this gives our lives meaning. This gives our life some value. And if you want to go through your life being a shit person, if you want to think that's meaningful, great. I don't. I don't want people to go through their life being a shit people. If there was less shit people in the world, there would be a lot more happiness in the world, and we'd enjoy the life that we have and make the most of it, right? Instead of having to point out all these shitty fucking people and fight against them. All right. So I'm not scared of death in that regard. But again, we never know until it happens, right? By the way, I should have died like a dozen times over by now, probably.
If your concern is being afraid of it and not accepting whether or not that's going to be a thing, it is kind of just one of those things that you either deny until it happens, or you kind of accept and come to terms with the fact that it's going to happen. But that doesn't necessarily do anything about the fear that can come along with that.
Sure.
If it's fear that you're concerned about and fear that you want to get over, then what you would need to do, I would think, is to find ways of either coping or ways of deciding it doesn't matter. One of the things about acceptance is that you don't really have any choice in the matter when it comes to death. You don't really get to choose how you die outside of some minor things. You can like, outside of specific details, you can choose that you're not going to die because you're excessively overweight and your cholesterol is awful. You can take care. There's something you can do about that. Or if you smoke and you want to stop smoking because you think that that's going to give you more problems down the line, you can do stuff about minor things like that. You can pick and choose. But ultimately, accepting that there's nothing you can do about it and it's going to happen, the fear of it is sort of something that's like, maybe just deal with that when the time comes. You can worry about being afraid of death when you die or when you are dying. You have plenty of time in the world, all the time, forever to be afraid when it happens. But being afraid of it just in your day-to-day life it's just going to impact whether or not you can enjoy yourself.
Yeah, it cripples.
So if you can focus on the things that you enjoy and what you like, and then every time you sort of start feeling afraid or panicked or a little bit of anxiety about dying, just remember that Hey, listen, I'll be afraid of it when it happens. I'll be afraid when I'm laying in front of a car and I've been hit and I'm going to die. I'll be afraid then. Then I can deal with that. But you don't have to be afraid of it right now because it's not imminent. It's not avoidable because it's not something you can do really anything about. You can kind of just take that fear and be like, you know what? I'll be afraid. I'll compartmentalize it. It doesn't mean that fear necessarily ever goes away. I think most people, in some degree, to at least somewhat, are afraid of some aspect of death, whether it be the pain of how they die, whether it be the I don't know how it's going to happen or when, so I'm just like have a pressure. If you can compartmentalize it and decide what to do with it, decide what to do with that however you see fit, whatever's healthy and productive for you. If you feel like it, go see a therapist, go talk to somebody who is a professional in this sort of regard. They might be able to help you find a better coping mechanism if it's coping that you need help with. But if you can compartmentalize it and be like, listen, you know what, you're terrifying, but you're not, I don't have to deal with you right now. I can deal with you when you happen, and then just kind of just in a little corner over here where it's like, I'll be afraid of death when I'm dying. And for now, I'm just going to live my life the way I want to, live my life to the best of my abilities, and, you know, maybe do some minor things that will pick and choose how I might, or I'm not going to die from bungee jumping because I'm never going to go bungee jumping sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, people could take more risk and less risk as they see fit, right? And enjoy their life to the maximum. Again, I'm not going to go jumping out of a plane, but I'm not going to tell other people not going to go do it, right?
I have had a fear of death for a long time, like a crippling fear of death. But I've kind of been able to shake it like over the last few years by having a kind of a new thought about death in general. I kind of think of it like as a cost, like it is your payment for living, and everyone has to pay it. You're not allowed to live without a payment of death. Nobody is allowed to do that. You have to die if you want to live.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it's non-negotiable, right? I mean, you have to accept one to have the other. Now, did it have to be that way? I have no idea if that's a metaphysical necessity or not, right? I mean, certain things literally are a metaphysical necessity. There could be no other logical way. I don't think living and dying are a logical necessity, but we have to recognize the fact that they are a biological necessity in that fact that, yes, you're exactly right. Without death, what would life mean? There's a distinction to be made there because that's how we understand our own existence. Even animals understand death, right? So this is something ubiquitous throughout the entire animal kingdom, I think, that and even probably beyond that, even plants might even understand the concepts in some capacity. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. Why have a crippling thing of death when you recognize that it is a natural part of life? We don't know what happens afterwards. And anybody who says they does, I don't think they're lying. I don't think they have any insight into it whatsoever. I don't think there's a single person on the planet that has any insight on what happens after you die. I think they're all full of shit, to be honest with you.
Well, I think there's a lot of religious groups. I'm not going to say individuals. I'm going to say some churches, not all churches.
Even see, Puck knows. Puck knows. See, he understands.
I agree with Puck.
We all have to agree with Puck. But does that make sense, Mr. Saracens, actually? That don't why worry about the things that you have no control over? I mean, it's easier said than done. We all have things that we just have no control over. I mean, look at the shit we all go through. We have no control over that. But the fact remains is we make it through, and we try to do the best we can during the time. Why is Puck upset? What did you do?
There was a dog outside that he wants to play with. There was a friend outside the window.
A girly dog?
I don't know. I haven't actually met this dog. I think it's a girl, but I'm not sure.
Go Puck.
He's in the other room now. But the thing is like some religions and some things will individuals will try and take advantage of your fear of something to sell you something or to get something out of you. There are ways of coping, and some people do turn to religion. Some people are like, you know what, I cope with it this way, or I cope with it that way. Sometimes it's community, sometimes it's just being around people that are like-minded, sometimes it's around being like around other people who are afraid is sometimes very helpful, because you can kind of come together, understand that, you know, we're afraid, but it doesn't affect our day-to-day life, because we've accepted that, well, I accept that death is going to happen. I accept that I'm afraid of it, and I move on, because what else are you supposed to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we are going to be wrapping this up. We got about 7 minutes. I have to end this exactly on the hour.
What a big topic to try and get to right near the end. I mean, oh my god!
You know, and I love the fact we move from things
back
fluently when it comes to these discussions, because these are all big topics, right? And there's no one size fits all. There's no easy answers to this stuff, and this is why people have the discussions. But it all comes full circle: is why associate with people that want to shut down the discussions? Why associate with people who want to shut down dialogue? If your position you think is correct, fight for it, right? Advocate for it. Give reasons for it. Give logic, right? Go
do something instead of telling other people they can't do something.
You look, yes, will people build themselves up by tearing other people down? Yes, but that's a cheap way to do it. And so don't be like that. Build up your own self, build up other people, rely on other people, have them help you out as you help them out, and just don't be a shit person. And I think a lot of these problems in the long run will resolve themselves. I mean, we have, you know, somebody in here earlier that was from the Arab countries. If a lot of them weren't so evil to each other, right? And so, hey, my way is the only way. If you don't agree with my way, I'm going to kill you. You know, doesn't matter of having a disagreement and cancel you. It's I'm going to kill you if you don't submit to Allah or whatever they happen to believe. If all of that stopped worldwide, how much nicer place would this place to be? And we would enjoy the life that we have far more than having to deal with these dogmatic and ideological thinking that, I'm sorry, is not just in the religion. It's not just into evangelicals. It is also in the atheist community just as much. I see no distinction.
Yeah. I think that there needs to be less arrogance on the internet, in my opinion. I think that there are a lot of specifically Americans, and no, I don't mean offense to Americans. This is just my experience. But a lot of people from this woke point, and like I'm sure a lot of them are Canadian. I'm sure there's a good number of them in Australian, but or wherever they're from. There seems to be this idea that this way of thinking and this way of approaching a conversation is the only way. This way of phrasing it is the only right way to do it. And if you don't do it the way I do, you're a bad person. If you don't do it the way I say and start doing it that way, you're wrong, period. And the thing is that a lot of conversations, and especially when it's something we're still learning and is a progressive, continual issue, like currently trans rights is like that, currently gay and women are still struggling with stuff like this. When it's a progressing issue, you need to understand that the reason it's a progressing issue is because we don't know what the right way is yet. And so when you come in and say, no, my way is the only way of doing this, you're stopping people from being able to figure out what the right way is, because you don't know that either.
All right, one last question on the table, and then we're going to wrap it up. Stonebutt had asked, should the government ban certain speech like Holocaust denialism? Actually, he's coming in. Should the government ban certain speech like Holocaust denialism? And I think the topic was never addressed during Roman Coke. It really wasn't. Here's my position on it, Stonebutt, and then you can weigh in real quick. For America, I don't think that America should levy laws against what you can deny, what you can't deny. We're a country of freedoms, and that's how we exist. Now, over in Germany, it's not the same type of system. And so for Germany to levy those laws, I can understand their reasoning behind it. So my answer would be, for Germany, I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's reasonable given the things that they have been through. I don't think it would work for America. And again, I'm not going to stop other people from having that discussion. If people want to go on other channels and they want to deny the Holocaust and they want to promote white supremacy on their own channels, that's them. All right. I'm very much against those things. I'm not going to have my channel. Should YouTube intervene on some of it? Yeah. I think YouTube has every right to. If YouTube has deemed a channel to be putting out, just grossly inaccurate historical information or vilely morally reprehensible things like racism and bigotry, then yeah, they should take action. But that's their platform to do. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to tell people don't have those discussions. You're more than welcome to. Does that answer your question, Stonebutt?
Yeah, that pretty much answers it. Also,
Awesome.
I have a question for you and Cheshire. How would you guys define woke? Because I'm someone on the far left, and I hear this term used by so many people, and they use it in so many different ways. And I'm like, it can mean like, from like rabid, foaming at the mouth, woke scolds, like people who use left-wing politics to abuse and harass others, all the way to people who just have nominally left-wing politics. So how would you guys use that term?
Yeah, I use it pejoratively. I use it as a group of people that thinks that their ideological perspective is so far leaning to will go out of their way to cancel anybody who disagrees with them, and as a form of activism by which instead of promoting their own positions and their own beliefs, they have to shut down the other persons instead. So it's not a movement that says, look, here's what we believe and let me explain why. It is more of a movement of, you're wrong, you're an evil person, we're going to vilify you, we're woke, you're not, you're still asleep, you don't know as much as we do, you're not smart enough to understand the things we understand, you're part of the problem, we're part of the solution, but we're not going to give you any ideas of how to actually solve anything except for silencing the critics. That to me is what I think is indicative of the woke culture. It's very much a matter of privilege versus persecution. Who is the more privileged class? Who's the more persecuted class? And we're going to pit one against the other, and we're going to see who could be the most, outraged and say, look, I'm the persecuted party. I'm going to be morally outraged from this, and if you don't accept that, then you're a bad person, and we have to shut you down. That's kind of how I use the word woke.
I'm a little bit more loose about what I mean. I think maybe usually if I'm speaking on this, I'm speaking as groups, not as individuals. It doesn't have to do with an individual's politics, right? It doesn't have to do with like what one individual believes or doesn't believe. It has to do with the way a group of more extreme people try to enforce and dictate their way of speaking or their way of doing things up onto other people to the detriment of the people they may be trying to help.
Yeah. And I'll give you a perfect example of woke culture. We have somebody, a woke warrior, clearing the live chat, which is perfectly fine, saying that it sounds like Ben Shapiro. None of us has ever sounded like Ben Shapiro. None of us. I'm not.
What? Ben Shapiro.
I mean, so this is.
I do want an example. I can sound like. Can I sound like Ben Shapiro for a second?
Can you
Oh no!
Do it.
I bought this piece of wood from Home Depot because people were telling me that I needed to give some wood to my wife for her wet ass pussy.
You know what's so funny? I'm not even kidding.
Wet ass P word.
I have an air conditioning.
Oh
unit
right,
here.
sorry, wet ass P. I messed it up.
I have an air conditioning unit here, and when they put the air conditioning in, they put a piece of board over it for the window, and on that board it says on there, it's written in pencil, "I'm a beautiful piece of wood." I don't know. I don't know. It's been there ever since it's weird. Yeah, but so I mean, again, this is the type of cancel culture. It's to say, look, we don't agree with you, therefore we're going to compare you to these other people. We're going to say, look, you sound like Trump. You're going to sound like Ben Shapiro. None of us.
Oh, this is what I was saying.
Right.
This is what I was saying earlier.
It's very loaded language. Yes. WizBiz nails it. It's loaded language, hyperbole, rhetoric, vilification. Instead of saying, hey, I don't agree
tribalism.
With you, let me show you why. It's I'm going to try to throw things at you to try to lessen you as a person or your position, rather than explain why that position is.
Your voice is too deep for Ben Shapiro. It's not nasally enough. The thing is, we kind of talked.
Let's say hypothetically.
I brought this up earlier, and it has to do with something that Brittany Simon was saying, which I 100% agree with. Just because something you say sounds like or could be something that somebody else uses to harm people.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you are using it to harm people. It does not make you part of that alliance. It does not mean you are actively going out to do anything. That's just whataboutism.
Yep.
If I say something about, oh, hey, there's some statistics that say white people are more likely to, white cops are more likely to domestically abuse their significant other, just because that might be a Black Lives Matter talking point does not align me with wanting to follow. I do support Black Lives Matter, but this is just the example I'm giving. You could do it the other way too. You could say that, hey, I read this statistic. I want to know more about this statistic about Black people. And somebody says, well, you're a white bigot would say that. Yeah, maybe they would, but that doesn't mean I'm using the statistic to try and be a bigot or try to justify bigotry or try to cause harm to somebody. It means I'm trying to talk about the statistics and how we improve that statistic.
Yep.
If you shut down my conversation about how do we make things better for Black people based on this statistic being problematic, you're harming Black people.
Yep, and
in this
and
situation.
by the way, they said if you had a Discord, I'd debate you. First on everything is not everything is a debate. We have discussions, and we all have Discord, and I don't see any difference between Discord and a Google Hangout. Anybody can call in. You've had the opportunity to call in. There's also the link that was in the video, in the live chat to join directly from a web page. Doesn't require Discord. Anybody could have called in. If you had a position that you believed very strongly in, you were more than welcome to call in and talk about it. You chose not to. Not that you're prevented from doing so. And that's the whole point of having these discussions, as we don't tell people what you cannot talk about. We allow them to do it. You choose whether you want to or not. You have chosen not to.
Shutting down a conversation that is trying to help somebody is doing what you're accusing other people of doing.
Exactly. All right, guys, we got to wrap this up because I do got to go. I am heading out here. I want to thank the callers, Jeshi and Stonebutt and Mr. Sirius. Thank you guys a lot for calling in.
And Darth myself.
And Darth myself. Yep, absolutely. Thank you for calling in. Love the chat. Please leave a comment in the video section. Please share this video. Get the word out so we can have additional people calling in. We're going to be doing this every Monday at 11 o'clock. I know people had wanted it at a different time. This is the time works for us. I like it. Cheshire likes it. It seems to be a good time slot for us. But anyways, I want to thank you guys. I'll keep you guys posted on any new developments coming up in the Non Sequitur show. We're going to have something obviously filed here coming out soon. And then Chester, you got anything coming up?
I'll be going through some more Non Sequitur show stuff tomorrow at 2:30 Eastern time, so pretty much the same time slot this is in. So that will be tomorrow. The link is already there if anybody wants to go and check that out. I've also got... No, I think that's pretty much all I'm working on. I have some other stuff I want to talk about, but I'm basically just trying to steam train through all of the Non Sequitur show documentation. So anybody doesn't know what I'm doing, I'm looking at all of the dockets all the way through from the beginning of the Non Sequitur show lawsuit all the way through.
Awesome.
And that's what I'm working on.
All right. Awesome,
Tomorrow,
guys. And we'll see you guys next week.
30.